Welcome, friends. Today's story will touch your soul. This is not just a story. It's a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. It was a cold, rainy evening. The streets were empty, and people hurried home under their umbrellas. But at an old bus stop sat a 65-year-old paralyzed woman in her wheelchair, drenched, shivering and waiting. No one even looked at her. Cars passed by, splashing water, but she stayed there quietly, her eyes filled with silent pain. Then from the other side of the road, a young man appeared, a single dad on his way home after a long shift. He noticed her and stopped. Without thinking twice, he ran through the rain and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice trembling with concern. The woman's lips quivered. "My bus didn't come. No one stopped for me." The young man took off his own jacket, wrapped it around her shoulders and said, "You don't need to wait anymore. I'll take you home." He pushed her wheelchair through the rain, step by step, soaked and freezing, but smiling gently so she wouldn't feel alone. People stared, but he didn't care. For him, helping her was more important than staying dry. When they reached her home, the old lady looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Nobody has been this kind to me in years," she whispered. The young man smiled and said, "Kindness costs nothing, but it can change someone's life." That night, she sat by her window and prayed for him, for his daughter, for his strength and for his heart. She knew that this stranger had reminded her that humanity still exists. So friends, remember, even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where every story reminds you that love and humanity are still alive. What happened next will melt your heart. The next morning, the single dad woke up early. His little daughter, Emma, was sitting by the window watching the rain. She looked at her father and asked, "Daddy, why are you wet in that picture?" pointing to his soaked jacket drying by the heater. He smiled gently, brushing her hair. "Because, sweetheart, I met someone last night who needed help more than I needed to stay dry." Emma tilted her head, curious. "Did you help her?" "Yes," he said softly. She couldn't move her legs, and she was waiting in the rain all alone. The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "That's so sad, Daddy. Can we go see her?" Her father looked at her, surprised, and then smiled. "You really want to?" Emma nodded. "You always say kindness makes the world brighter. Let's bring her something warm." That afternoon, holding a small basket filled with homemade soup and a blanket, they returned to the same bus stop. The woman was there again, her wheelchair beside the bench. When she saw the man and his daughter, her eyes widened in disbelief. "You came back?" she said in a trembling voice. "Yes," he replied, smiling. "And this is Emma. She wanted to meet you." Emma walked up shyly and handed her the basket. "Daddy says you're strong like my grandma." The old woman took the basket with shaking hands, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "You're both angels," she whispered. The man knelt beside her again and said softly, "No, ma'am, we're just humans, trying to keep the light alive." The rain began to fall again, softly this time, and for a moment, all three of them sat together under one small umbrella, sharing warmth, laughter, and something the world forgets too often, compassion. Later that evening, as they said goodbye, the woman looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, God, for sending me a family when I had none." And somewhere deep inside, the single dad realized, sometimes saving someone's life doesn't mean pulling them from danger. It means reminding them they're not invisible. So, my dear friends, never underestimate the power of a kind heart. If you thought the story was over, you're wrong. What happened next will make you believe in miracles. Days passed after that rainy night. The single dad, Daniel, and his little daughter Emma often visited the old lady, whose name was Margaret. They brought her food, medicines, and laughter. Slowly their visits became part of her life, and she became a part of theirs. One evening, Daniel knocked on her door, but she didn't answer. Worried, he called out, "Miss Margaret?" "It's me, Daniel." He pushed the door open gently and found her sitting near the window, staring outside, her eyes filled with tears. "Are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. She looked up slowly and said, "You know, I used to have a son. He stopped visiting me years ago. Every day I prayed for someone to call me Mom again." Daniel froze. His heart clenched. He placed his hand over hers and whispered, "Then from today, your family." Tears rolled down her face as Emma ran forward and hugged her tightly. "Grandma Margaret," she said with a bright smile. For the first time in years, the old woman's face lit up with joy. Her shaking hands gently rested on Emma's head, and she said, "No one's ever called me that since my son left. You've given me back my life." That night they all sat together at the dinner table, the little girl laughing, Daniel smiling softly, and Margaret looking at them both like they were her own blood. The sound of rain outside filled the silence with peace. But as the days went by, Margaret's health began to fail. Her doctor warned that her heart was growing weaker. When Daniel visited her one morning, she whispered faintly, "Promise me something. Don't let kindness die in your heart. The world needs people like you." Daniel held her hand tightly, fighting back tears. "You saved me too, Margaret. You reminded me what love feels like." She smiled weakly and said, "Then I can go peacefully." A few days later, Margaret passed away quietly in her sleep, with a smile on her face, and a photo of Daniel and Emma on her bedside table. At her funeral, Daniel whispered, "You weren't just someone we helped. You became our family, and we'll carry your kindness forever." As they walked home in the soft drizzle, Emma looked up at the sky and said, "Daddy, Grandma Margaret is watching us from heaven, right?" Daniel smiled through his tears. "Yes, sweetheart. And she's proud that we didn't just talk about kindness. We lived it." Friends, remember this. Sometimes, strangers become family, and one simple act of compassion can echo through generations. Dear friends, today we reach the final chapter of this soul-stirring story, a chapter filled with tears, faith, and the kind of love that never fades. Since Margaret's passing, the seasons had changed, but her memory lived in every corner of Daniel and Emma's small home. Her old green scarf still hung by the window, where the morning sunlight touched it gently every day. One evening, while cleaning, Emma found a small, sealed envelope with her name written on it. "For my little sunshine, Emma." She ran to her father, holding it tightly. "Daddy, look. It's from Grandma Margaret." Daniel opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter and a tiny golden locket. His hands trembled as he began to read. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm probably watching over you from a place where pain doesn't exist anymore. You brought light into my dark world, my little angel. You reminded me what it means to smile again. Please promise me that you'll always be kind, even when the world isn't. And Daniel, my son, thank you for letting me feel a mother's love again. You didn't just help me that night at the bus stop. You helped me find my faith in humanity again. With all my love, Grandma Margaret." By the time he finished reading, Daniel's eyes were filled with tears. He closed the letter and whispered, "She never stopped caring." Even after she was gone, Emma opened the locket. Inside was a tiny picture of all three of them together, taken just a week before Margaret passed away. On the other side it said, "Kindness never dies." From that day, Daniel made a promise to honor Margaret's last wish. He started a small charity, helping elderly people who had no families, no one to care for them. He called it Margaret's Light. Every weekend, Daniel and Emma would visit bus stops, hospitals, and nursing homes, bringing blankets, food, and most importantly, love. One rainy evening, much like the night they first met Margaret, Daniel saw another old woman struggling with her wheelchair near the same bus stop. Without hesitation, he ran forward to help. As he knelt beside her, a flash of memory filled his eyes. The same rain, the same kindness, the same compassion. He smiled and whispered, "Let me help you, Mom." The old woman looked at him with watery eyes and said softly, "There aren't many people like you left, son." Daniel looked up at the dark, cloudy sky and smiled faintly. "There are, ma'am. We just need to keep the light alive." And as he pushed her wheelchair under the glowing streetlights, the rain fell softly again, as if heaven itself was blessing his act of love. Emma watched from the car window, holding her locket close to her heart and whispering, "Grandma Margaret, we're still spreading your kindness. So friends, remember this forever. Love doesn't end when a person leaves. It continues through every act of compassion we share. No matter how cold the world feels, one kind soul can still make it warm again. Tonight, we bring you the final chapter, not just of a story, but of a journey that began with a single act of kindness in the rain. What happens now will stay with you long after the video ends. Years passed. Emma grew up into a young woman, just like her father always dreamed. She had the same warmth in her eyes, the same smile that once comforted a lonely old woman named Margaret. Daniel, now older, still ran Margaret's light, helping the forgotten. Souls of the city, the lonely, the old, the broken, just as he once helped her. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside, Daniel sat in his small office, looking at the framed photo on his desk. Him, little Emma, and Margaret smiling together. He touched it softly and whispered, "We did it, Mom. Your kindness didn't die." Just then, the door opened. Emma walked in, her eyes shining. "Dad," she said softly, "the charity got a letter. You need to see this." She handed him an envelope. The handwriting looked familiar, old and delicate. Daniel opened it carefully, his hands trembling. The letter read, "Dear Daniel and Emma, I was Margaret's neighbor years ago. Before she passed away, she told me about the night you helped her at the bus stop. She spoke of you both with so much love. She left a small piece of land and some savings in my care, asking that they be given to you when Emma becomes an adult to keep helping others. She said, tell them this isn't a goodbye. It's a promise that kindness will always find its way back to them." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't speak. He just looked up toward the sky and whispered, "Even from heaven she's still giving." Emma hugged her father tightly, crying softly. "Dad, she's still watching us." That very night, Daniel and Emma went to the bus stop where it all began. It was quiet, the same flickering streetlight above, and the same soft drizzle in the air. Daniel knelt down beside the bench and placed a single flower there, Margaret's favorite, a white lily. He whispered, "You taught me that one small act of kindness can change 1,000 lives. I promise, as long as I live, your light will never fade." The wind blew gently, and for a brief moment, Daniel felt something, a warmth on his shoulder like a gentle touch. He looked up and smiled through his tears. "Good night, Mom," he whispered. Years later, when Daniel's hair had turned grey, Emma took over the charity. She stood on the same rainy street helping a stranger, smiling just like her father once did. And somewhere above the clouds, Margaret and Daniel watched together, proud, and because their kindness had become a legacy. Friends, this story isn't just about a man, a child, and an old woman. It's about how one simple act of love can outlive generations. If this story touched your soul, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness. Because here we don't just tell stories, we keep kindness alive.